I mean, it's a conversation at the end of the day, shifting the conversation around the South African cricket team and that narrative that exists.
These type of conversations are happening in casual commentary at braais, at home, with people that are just watching the game and those sort of things. And we're wanting to do nothing different than having that same sort of conversation, perhaps just lift the lid somewhat, lift the caliber of the conversation, because we've already peeked behind the curtains or under the covers, if you want to use that term, right?
As soon as you get clear on your motivations and your purpose and your intention, a lot of things can start falling into place.
Yeah.
A lot of things become automated. A lot of things all of a sudden goes, oh, okay, cool, that's how I'm going to do it. So the hows become very clear when the whys are clear.
These guys are hopeful that they're winners. They're not seeing themselves as winners entering it. Despite their having illustrious careers, it's a matter of coming together under the Proteas brand is where things come unstuck in a way.
So the identities of our local cricketing ecosystem has been completely eradicated at a provincial level. There is no longer that sort of, oh, I want to play for this team. Yeah.
It's like taking someone that's not familiar or not comfortable or used to being free and not shown how to handle that freedom. It's the same sort of analogy when we start talking about a playing philosophy of playing with freedom.
All exciting stuff that we're going to get into, right? All exciting stuff that we're going to get into. I'm already like salivating a little bit. Hey, just want to say before we get into this conversation that during the conversation, both Russell and myself mentioned that we're not going to name and shame. However, through the natural flow of the conversation, we do mention some organizations and some individuals by name. And we want to make it clear that we're not calling people out in the purpose of naming and shaming, but more in the name of transparency, that we've done work. We've been in environments. We've seen some things, and it is textured by our own perspective and our own thoughts and our own opinions. And it's not done in a malicious way or with malicious intent to point the finger and say bad, wrong, don't do it like that.
Yeah, I think also, the fact that we're doing it in the spirit of truly finding connections and resonance with each other to build this equity of relationships. Sometimes we have to be a little bit more straightforward as we lift the lid, lift the covers, and we discover a few things and it's a little bit uneasy. And we have to be a little bit direct. So in the spirit of truly finding that resonance and connection, this is why we maybe mention the name and drop the shame.
Cool. Awesome. Enjoy the conversation. Let us know what you think. Okay. No, and I think that's an important part of the conversation, right? So where my head was going was, now I think I forgot my one point.
Oh, no.
But the other one, no, but I wrote the one down. So I'm not going to forget it. It's this thought or this idea that can excellence come from a township? And I think that's what you're alluding to, right? Because I think before we started the recording, we spoke a little bit about the school system and maybe I've got it wrong, right? But it sort of summarizes where we're at with the conversation. Is that in my head, I think before this conversation, I said something like, or this morning when I was making my notes, I was thinking, maybe it was then, that excellence comes from exposure, right? That's how I think about it. Excellence comes from exposure. So if I'm exposed to a standard, I get used to that standard and I can start performing at that level. So you have your predominant cricketing schools, as an example, playing each other with good cricketers in those skilled cricketers in the schools, because maybe they go buy them or maybe they just develop them, whatever the means is by which they get them. And then they compete against other schools. And often the townships don't compete in that stuff, right? And so I think that sort of hits the core for me in terms of what you're saying, is that there's these systems, there's this hierarchy of things, right? And so the hierarchy potentially says good cricketers only come out of certain schools. Good cricketers only come out of certain areas. Good cricketers only come out of a certain color, right? I think we're beyond the color thing. I think we're understanding as a society. We've got the Rabadas, we've got the Bavumas, we've got the Tony DeZorzis, we've got sort of cricketers coming through, we've got the Keshav Maharaj and the Hashim Amlas. I think we're understanding that excellence can come from anywhere to a certain extent. I don't think we're fighting the white black Indian colored thing so much necessarily at a base level anymore. Back in the day, it was a case of, oh, look at that black kid. They're just in this team because of the color of their skin. I think we're seeing less and less of that. You certainly know that in teams that I've been involved with, it doesn't matter who takes the wickets. If we take the wicket, everybody gets the same high five, right? I don't think it lives at that level anymore, but it lives potentially still in this undercurrent of, in the systemic nature of, can excellence come from a township? Can a black kid go to a school in his township, goes to his township club, from that make a representative team and not be pulled into the old structures, stay in the township, stay in his home, stay with his family, stay in an environment that, and still end up being it. And we've only had one that I'm aware of, one cricketer who's walked that journey, which was Mackay Antini. I don't know, maybe there's others, but
there are others. There are many others actually. Yeah, the Asheville Prince. I think Paul Adams as well. Paul Adams came straight from club cricket as well.
Yes.
So there are a few. I mean, we can cherry pick guys out of townships and then put straight into international spaces even. That is a big fallacy and a big myth that needs to be debunked and busted really. And the mere fact that we kind of bought into this narrative that we have to go through established systems is also where we're getting it wrong, where we think that only, if you use, call it cricket in PE, and let's use an example, right? If we snapped up a Siya Kolisi from Zwidi and we put him at grey, all of a sudden it's not Zwidi that's actually pointing out that Siya Kolisi made it to the highest heights. It's Grey High School that's pointing that, because they seemingly claiming the rights to have groomed him and prepared him. But he's a son of the soil of Zwidi, right? Of the townships. And I felt like a lot of his education and his grounding still stemmed from Zwidi. And that's what we're neglecting, right? And yet we can still groom and discover these individuals. I, for once, had, and I said this before, a Springbok rugby player and a hockey player living across the road from me. And he lived all his life, but he couldn't represent the country, So there's a lot of these stories that we've lost over the years, and they can still be sustained as long as there's enough support to say it doesn't have to come only one way. It can come through in different means. And their voices do matter, but it's seemingly also numbed down because the energy and the support is not necessarily going in that directions. What Cricket South Africa has done was to throw an RPC and hubs and those sorts of things to try and support club development, but it's still not necessarily coming through that because of these rankings of soft skills. Like, no, traditionally, the majority of them are going to come from these established schools, right? So these are cricket schools, so it has to come from a Grey Bloom or, you can name all the names, right?
Yeah.
And as a result of it, that's how we still think. And I think that mentality needs to change. And it's a soft skill challenge, really. Where we constantly, and we're being distracted by the BEE sort of approach to it, by transformation imperatives. Yes, we need to have representation because it's way too long, but it's because these mentalities are still at play. And people are sitting in key positions at pushing these mentality. So people are feeling, including myself, I had enough experience of this, where we were oppressed and said, no, this doesn't matter. These are the ways we do things. Because we want to mimic, back in the day we want to mimic the Australians because look how successful they are. We just want to copy and paste and do what they do. And then we all of a sudden, England started being successful. Now we want to mimic England's system, right? With their approach now, baseball and copying a director of cricket and all those sorts of things. The next we want to do, because there's money in the game, we're going to copy Indians. And we want to do it the way the Indians do it, right? So the point is we need to be creative enough to understand our problems, our challenges, and address what our flaws are, which in those flaws, like a township, like a, whatever, there are gifts and silver lining gifts that can benefit us if we open ourselves to it. But we are not looking to our own source of wisdom. We are rather looking to other mechanisms and wanting to distract it based on those things. If you just look at the Indians, for instance, I think I'm not 100% certain this is just a casual conversation. But this latest guy that's made the Indian team, for instance, I think he has come through no established structures in India. but he's hit the national team. This left-hander for Rajasthan Royals. Just can't remember his
Is
name
it
off the
Jaiswal? Jaiswal, is it
Jaiswal.
him? Yeah.
Jaiswal. I think he landed up in the streets in Mumbai or something, trying to go to an academy. He's just trying to kind of just, show his skill and whatever, and then made it through. We
Mm,
don't have any forms of things like that in South Africa, right?
mm,
Where there's talent and capacity and enthusiasm and whatever. We don't have any means of private academies that are welcoming kids, spotting them and kind of creating a pathway into the national spaces. But we
mm,
could. Our RPCs and hubs are supposed to be doing this, but there seems to be this cloud of suppression. And those gatekeepers in particular, as I said, needs to lift their thinking, their mentality, because these are the things that come through because they're not developing black cricketers because they're suppressing them. When I say black cricketers, non-white, people who are not wanting to be like the old whites, right? The privileged ones. So we don't really have to use that phraseology of color anymore, but wanting to be the privileged mentality or
mm,
the special ones or the ones who are kind of superior even, right? This bossing type of, or what do you call it, demeanor,
mm,
where so that for me is what needs to be dismantled. And when we come to some form of humility on that, right, from all angles, wherever we come from, if we come to a humility and a commonness, then we can move forward. Then we can progress. And until
yeah.
we get that conversation over the line, I don't think we're going to get real with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellence at all levels is sort of where my head goes. Excellent. So this idea of the hubs, right? I've been in hubs. I've gone to those spaces. I've seen those kids. I've seen how they get worked with. There is an undercurrent of not good enough, and so I think maybe it's because our facilities are not as good as the
Yeah.
Affis and the Saints and the Kezes of this and Ronda Bosches or wherever you're at. Maybe it's that. Maybe it's the environment, right? Environment plays a part. That has an effect, but also environment can produce a different type of excellence. That's at least how I try and think about it. Malinga
Yeah.
was the product of his environment. It was tape ball cricket. I didn't want to bounce the ball like this. I was playing a lot in the street, so he developed a bowling action that's unlike anything we've seen in the world in the streets of Sri Lanka, right? So excellence can come from anywhere. And I think if I hear you accurately, it's sort of saying we're not open to excellence coming from anywhere. We're not having the child in the hub believe excellence can happen here, right?
Yeah.
We're having them believe in some way that excellence only happens over there, wherever there might be. And because I'm not there, I'm not good enough. But then that cricketer at some point in time needs to be picked. And so he gets picked because maybe he is good. That one from the hub. He gets picked, but he sits inside a team where he doesn't believe he's equal to the others. He believes he's sort of not good enough. And hey, white cricketers go through that too, right? I think it's not part of this conversation that must be not looked at. I've worked with enough cricketers over the last 3 years as a mental performance coach to know that this is not something that's unique to the color of your skin. White cricketers also get picked into teams and thinking they're not good enough. I mean, I sat in front of the CEO of Gauteng Cricket many years ago, and he basically told me straight up, as a white guy to white guy, and maybe, I don't know if he was Jewish or whatever, maybe that's a different thing, right? But it alludes to the same idea that there's these hierarchies. I am not like you. And because I'm not like you, you're not at my level, or I'm not at your level. And so it creates this imbalance in our society.
Yeah.
That this kid now gets picked, and he's actually phenomenal, but we can't play with the freedom. We can't be expressing because of that. I think that's what you're saying, right? I'm hoping I'm starting to get where your head's at, maybe in my own words.
Yeah, so this is why I suggest that the premise of all approaches to cricket right now in South Africa and the globe over, right? This applies, it's transferable, right? It's applicable to everyone, is to recognize it's not a fallacy, it's a pure principle truth that in each one of us, there's a unique gift and a champion that has the capacity to be a champion in whatever sphere in life, right? If you have skills to be a cricketer, that gifted individual, that champion on the inside of you, that inner winner is real. if given enough opportunity and encouragement, you can realize it, whether it's in cricket or outside of cricket, right? But we have to start from the basis of, when I see you, I see a champion. And let's see if we can draw that champion out. I don't care what your color of your skin is, what your background. I probably prefer you to stay in where you are currently. Don't relocate. Don't go from where you've groomed up and grown and then go into a different ecosystem and let them show you how to live life. Stay where you are and let's call that champion out, because you have all the support around you, right? Let's call that champion out and call it out quickly, because we're starting on the right basis. We're respecting the champion inside of you, just as I can respect the champion inside of me, right? So what happens is, I think there's this phrase, I don't know why I'm thinking about the Indian phrase now, where it says namaste, which basically suggests that the God in me greets the God in you type of thing, right? So it's the same thing. The champion in me is recognized as the champion in you. And when we do that, no matter what the color of your skin, no matter what your background, what your status is in life, when we do that, we try to call out that inner champion to be of service to us all by you realizing that capacity. And if we start on that basis, then we dismantle all this other gatekeeping hierarchy and barriers that are basically sabotaging people's careers and preventing excellence from happening. Because we don't know, like you were referring to the Malinga, who could be trying to imitate whatever in the township somewhere, right? Playing a game of cricket purely because they watched the game or got invited to do something. And that becomes the next best. I'm telling you, the talent is there. We got over an abundance of talent. We're just not seeing the gems that we are to each other, right? And it doesn't help that we are pushing the old narratives 30 years down the line and only getting a marginal few. So it is kind of an indictment that we only have one Black African in the team currently, because we haven't really made the attempt to start seeing ourselves as champions. And we kind of hero worship these 15 that's going to the World Cup, but there's a whole host of them that are waiting in the wings to just being looked at as a victor, as a radio winner, that we're going to kind of coming soon, coming attractions. We called it out now, and it doesn't matter. We just need to look at it through a different lens and have those type of meaningful conversations. And sincerity. We have to have the sincerity of heart, because, this old phraseology of being verkrampt, and we use the terminology. Some people are so stuck in their mentality, they can't see beyond their conditioning and they can't see beyond their belief systems. And therefore, that BS, their belief systems, is what's creating BS. For all of us, we're stepping in at left, right, and center. So ultimately, that's the real stuff that we have to tend with. That old mindset, we kind of have to say, we're not playing those games anymore. We need to find a way to say, there's excellence everywhere in South Africa, no matter where you go, even if it looks like rubbish. There's excellence to be found here, and we can groom it and nurture it as long as we have the right lens and approach to it. I'm sitting in a space where you would be disregard, like when I come into this, call it metaphysical space where we're talking this language, it's uphill battle for the most part. You would know this, particularly in South Africa, because they're resistant to soft skills, right? It's heavy, but it's like that for you and for me in terms of the kind of pushback that we're getting, because they want to keep it just superficial, bat and ball, but it's not. It's more than that, because every single time they choke, and choking is a soft skill or a metaphysical reality, an abstraction that comes to the fore, right? So as a result of it, because I've stepped into that zone, I was once told from my own kind, supposedly, if you want to call it own kind, remember, you're entering a white space now, which means white people you don't bring these type of things. Only white people can speak this language. And then the system supports that narrative. Seriously. So why would, if you have quality to bring and you have a championship mentality and a principled approach, why can't you be an answer, right? And likewise, if someone has value to add, why can't you allow that person to have a voice and come to the table and share amongst that table, right? But those are the realities of what we experience. And it is experienced day in, day out in the current system that we're in. And we're going to keep failing in our systems, in our structures, because we are not really opening up the door to see people for the value that they really are.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're speaking my language there, right? In a lot of ways, I think where my thinking is at, I am aware though for myself, right? And I think you as you speak there, that idea of investigating, being aware of, looking into, what are you actually thinking? What are you feeling? How do you make sense of this idea and these type of concepts, right? Maybe you think differently to the way Russell and I are speaking here, and that's okay too, right? And I think that's part of what this conversation is about, is that ability to hear each other, not just make the assumption, or not just keep pandering to sort of the same structures, the same things, the same thinking. Like every year when there's a World Cup, or every other year, or whenever it is, and the South African cricket team plays, there's similar language in front of TVs across everywhere. Yeah. You hear it at the nets. Oh, geez, here we go again. Oh, is the chokers. I mean, already one article, second article that I can't wait for the Proteas to choke at the T20 World Cup. So we're repeating the same stuff. And if we talk of transformation, to me, it's investigating those things and saying, well, are these the best ways to be going about it still? And so this was my other thought from before that I forgot, was without discounting the past, without discounting where we come from. And I think you allude to it a little bit, but how do we move forward, right? How do we actually go and say we're going to take a team and go to the World Cup? Because we've selected 15 people to go represent our country. There's already question marks around these types of things. I wouldn't know if they're reading it or not reading it. My sense is they would have seen it in some way. I don't know. I know some cricketers that just ban that type of stuff. They wouldn't even engage with social media, but some don't. They're on Instagram. They're on Crick Info, checking scores. They're on all these places. You're bound to see the headline. Maybe you're disciplined enough to not click on it, but you've seen it, or there is an awareness about it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not something that's in that team that they're talking about it and making it an issue or a concern at this point in time, but it has an influence, because all of these cricketers at one point in time sat on a couch watching a TV with their parents, being at a net with other kids and other parents, being at a practice, talking about, and so there is an influence, there is an undercurrent. And so, like I say, not discounting the past, what's your perception on where we really need to go, right? So if we had to lift the covers and say, yes, there's this old archaic things that live there that we've got to break down. And my sense is we've almost got to break it down at an individual level. That's transformation, right? Like if I'm not transforming just in my immediate environment, then I'm not part of the solution. I can't change CSA system. I can't change the structure, but I can at a club meeting be aware of, hang on, no, we're still doing this, or be aware of, no, we're thinking that the black cricketers that are joining our clubs, that maybe we're thinking of them less than. Maybe we bat them at 5 instead of giving them that opportunity to open the batting, just like we would any other kid, right? Are we treating every single child coming through our doors with a mindset and an attitude that there's a champion within, and we are going to do our best to help them, support them, to get that out, I mean, I did some research a while ago, and maybe we'll get into it another day. But it's a clear indication of a systemic thing at a cricket union where white cricketers are kept post-school and black cricketers are not. It's a clear as daylight indication that it happens. It's just to look at stats for the last 10 to 15 years of their provincial teams, how they got selected, which cricketers moved through the system from 13, 15, 17, 19, which cricketers after 19 are still with the union. And what's the volume of that? What's the volume of cricketers coming through, and what percentages are being kept? I did a whole research project just for myself, for my own interest on this.
Yeah.
And it was remarkable that at the end of it, and I can't remember the exact figures now, that within the Gauteng cricket ecosystem at the time, that they kept 1-2 black African cricketers. Yet the white cricketers that stayed in the system were way more. If you then go look how many white cricketers left the union and went to the UK, It was a huge percentage. How many players of color? None. Not a single one has gone overseas, or some have left and made a career on the other side. Not a single one has left. So you've got this high volume of white cricketers coming through a system where they keep some leave, and if you go look at their players of color, they're all sitting in other parts of the country, bar one or two. And that's a problem to me. It's like you're not supporting your own. You're not backing the one that comes out of your backyard. You are looking for the answer somewhere else. You're going and you're looking for the answer in other places. You're not saying there's excellence within what we've got, and we've got to be better at upskilling. We've got to be better at developing so that we can have the performance from our own. We're to me, it was like clear as daylight. And I don't mind mentioning the province there because it was done in a specific province because it was where I was. And I was fighting this battle within me to say, what is actually going on here? What does the numbers and the facts actually say? And I'll happily update that spreadsheet because I think I need to do like 2 or 3 years worth and see where are all these cricketers now. And we could happily have a conversation just on that and like talk through it properly. Like look at what's actually happened. These are the facts and the figures and the numbers as they sit in front of us. This is not to thumb suck or to be weird and wonderful. This is like what's actually happening, because I thought that's the only way I could make sense of it, is to go do the research and see, because I had a sort of sense about it and a feel about it. Yeah, sorry, I know I kind of went off on some tangents there.
No, it's not off the point. It's actually on the point. Yeah. I think it's almost echoed across the landscape. Also, if you look at, I'll mention it, if you look at the Titans, for instance, it almost feels, and the general feeling among certain cricketers and the landscape, right? They would actually say that they're buying success. Now, they're highly proficient. They're one of the best achieving franchises. Winning, right? Is winning going to translate to impact? That's the question, right? Because are they actually developing their own, call it Black African or non-white cricketers? Do they? Or are they purchasing? Are they putting out their purse and then buying them over, right? Similar to possibly what you're referring to with Gauteng there, right? Is it a matter of we're not really seeing the value and kind of grooming it? Now, I'm not saying they don't have, but there is an kind of talk that's lingering talk, a rumored talk, that is the case. And you look across and then maybe they see evidences of that. Whether your study proves to be accurate and true, which it probably is, there is that type of conversation. So if the conversations are being had, then you need to know that the lens in which they perceive these, we don't really need to develop, because you don't see the value there. We can just buy, because it's easier for us to just go buy and acquire, right? Let's bring over whoever. And in actual fact, I've even heard it said from in the Titan space as an example, you play for us, I guarantee you'll play for South Africa. These are non-white cricketers, by the way. You play for us for a few years, 1 or 2 years, then we'll guarantee you will play for South Africa. Is that because of their excellence in their structures? I'm not quite 100% sure. Maybe we really need to speak openly about what that's all about. But why are you so adamant that you are the pathway to the national team? And how successful has it been for Titans representation going into the national team, and do they win? Have they won? Have they won anything? You know what I mean? In terms of World Cups in particular, right?
Yeah.
So, but what I like, your question is, how do we go about the sense of excellence? I think there's a clear answer, which we are completely kind of neglecting, right? The answer actually lies in that, and this is what excited me about cricket. Cricket is very reflective of real life, right? And what often happens is we create these pseudo power barriers, power structures or hierarchy, right? Where we tend to want to elevate ourselves, and because now I'm the captain, or I'm the first change bowler, or the first strike bowler, or whatever, all these different phraseologies. So when we put ourselves in these power positions, and it creates distance between us. So there's no real trust between us, right? And it facilitates this type of inbreeding of, I don't see the value in you. I'm more special, more superior. And you see that time and time after again, and it's even more amplified at a higher level, where your captain is regarded more superior to everyone else in the team. And I understand the nuance of why you need to have a representation, someone who has a mouthpiece, who physically lifts flips the coin and makes a couple of decisions. But you see the trend now in cricket where everyone is kind of, let's pull the collective what's name into account. Graeme Smith back in the day was a youngster when he was a captain. You can't tell me he knew better than Gary Kirsten is in the team, or all those big names, Alan Donald, whoever was playing back then. They knew enough about cricket to guide him. So he wasn't the primary one making the calls of who needs to bowl when. You know what I mean? So why do we have this narrative of the captain is special? And we're creating power distance between that. And it automatically has this rankings, right? So that's why I like the game, because it clearly has these rankings, these pyramids. And
Mm.
I'm saying the answer lies to dismantle those pyramids, those superficial pyramids. I so much so at the MSL, we had this sense of the captain is so special, he needs to get certain privileges outside the game, not on the field privileges, outside of the game privileges. And it automatically creates disparity. Like, why are
Mm.
you so important? You can fly in and out and come when you want and go where you want. And you're creating a division within the team, right? And we have to consciously attempt to try and create a unifying effect again and push back against that. And those things
Mm.
have massive impact, right? So because of the hierarchy within the game, if you dismantle the hierarchy somewhat and create a sense of self-management, which means you give everyone a leveled voice and something that matters, they come to the table with their value, with their sense of importance, magic happens. Magic happens. Because
Mm.
everyone now starts feeling like whatever they're bringing is making a dent, making an impact, and they are a puzzle piece of this big picture, not just a mechanism, a cog in the machine of trying to win, a means
Mm.
to an end, where you belong, but as long as you give us the result. You know
Mm.
what I mean? We'll make you feel acceptable. You play according to our rules. You play your cards right. You can come with us, and we're gonna get this victory. And then we'll throw you your reward. You know what I mean?
Mm.
But you still feel like, oh, am I really? Are we really connected here? Do we have a proper connection? And for the most part, there wasn't that sincerity. Over the years, because these rankings, paternalistic type approach has been prevalent. So when you dismantle that and you create a self-management where you empower and you give a sense of freedom to players and their voice mattering. Now we are tapping into a potential pool where
Mm.
when someone says something from their space, you can hear them because you value them firstly and say, let me take that into account. Let me walk off and say, okay, so how does that change my world and how does that change our world collectively?
Mm.
And what can we do differently so that we can bring you up or lower myself or find a middle ground, whatever.
Yeah.
Now we're dismantling that superficial privileges and we are
Mm.
finding the connections person to person. And then we can become a team. Then we can
Yes.
go for the World Cup.
Yeah.
That's when we can
I,
go.
I always said I think it's going to take a special team of 15 players and their support staff, how many ever that may be, that need to do special things that have never been done before, out of the ordinary,
Yeah.
to go do something special. I think where my head's at with this conversation is it's gonna, and maybe sort of some of the conversations you are having offline, it's not just going to take a special team. It's going to take a special nation or a special cricketing community to start doing things and thinking things and feeling things in a special way, in a completely different way to what we're doing, to produce 15 special players to go do
Yeah.
something special, rather than leaving it just in the hands of a team to go do this miraculous thing. And I think, you said it before, not in this conversation, but you said it that we're trying to take the rugby blueprint, but the rugby hasn't necessarily influenced the ecosystem or the community below. Yes,
Yeah.
they've achieved the success at the top end, but has that really filtered down? Has that resolved all the systemic issues and problems? It most probably hasn't, right? I don't know rugby well enough to really make a fair comment on that.
Yeah.
And so I think the core of this conversation for me is that idea of we've got to be different. We've got to find at every single level, when you look in the mirror, not put your makeup on and go look pretty to the world, to go look in the mirror to what actually is there. What am I actually thinking? What am I feeling? What am I thinking about that black cricketer at my club and those colored parents when they come as a white guy, right? What am I actually thinking about that? If I'm the coach, how am I making my selections, with all these different religions and colors that's in my teams and how am I actually am I legit giving everybody their fair shot? Yeah. or am I not? Am I texturing that in some way? And it could be archaic, like as in old structure, or it could just be some new way that's maybe still not healthy, like to really go look at that. And then the specialness can come, because I can't be authentic with you and real with you if I'm not real with myself first.
Sure.
If I'm not that self-aware that, oh crap, I'm actually thinking this rubbish, I'm actually, I'm actually whatever it might be. I'm struggling to find a good example in the moment. And so I think unless we get real with ourselves first, we can't get real in our relationships in our relating with each other. And if we're not real in our relating with each other, then we're all superficial. Then we're either kumbayaing, or we're sort of dangling a nice carrot that just gets our energies and our motivations up, but actually causing hurt and damage. I've heard a couple of cricketers that, like, as you were speaking, I remember very specifically one cricketer speaking, and I think it was just an offlandish conversation that I was like a partial ear to, and them sort of speaking about their experience in the national team and how disconnected it was. And I was sitting there thinking, like, wow, like, how's that? How is it that you're going into this premium space of excellence where we thinking that everything should be golden and you guys should be committed and locked in and like ready to go, and it actually feels like it's like completely dismantled, and it's every guy for themselves, and it's and so I think we've got a lot of work to do. We've got a lot of work to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of disillusionment about when you enter spaces like that. Remember also that for the most part, when you talk about the old Proteas fire, and I don't know what they're phrasing it now, but the coming together of their culture, the sense of belonging, whatever, for the most part, what they're attempting to do without knowledge, or maybe they're kind of consciously doing that now, is that it's a space of very much inclusion, but inclusion for themselves only, which is a little bit apart from the rest of society, right? So they're kind of like this exclusive space of including like a little boys club, right? But if you step out of line because of the rankings and the rules and the sense of support that we offer, this empowerment, if it turns to be disempowerment where you struggle, that the sincerity of the relationship is not as real or genuine. So therefore, people will become very quickly disillusioned because we haven't really hit that sweet spot. I'm loving you, but you're a bit of a what do they call this? A black sheep in the family, right? Or you're struggling, so now I don't know how to relate to you, but I'm supposed to be because of this system we've set up. So there's a lot of feuds, family feuds that can happen in this type of space. And if you get cast aside because the coach decides, no, you're not one of us, right? We don't see a future for you. Deem Elgar, for instance, for example, then very much disillusions. Then it becomes a sense of embitterness almost because of this whole thing. And I'm just mentioning that because of recent articles. But I mean, the point is that spaces are got a lot of those old systemic ways of thinking. And until we really get real, these are some of the things that we are talking about, lifting the covers that are constantly always being there, constantly prevailing. And they need to address these things because it's affecting them as they go to take that bed on. So it's a little bit unfair, unweighted because it's hidden under these covers. And unless we air it out, it's not going to change, right? Unless we air it.
Yeah.
So I like also, just to further expand on your point about the Rugby World Cup. So the thing that we were saying earlier, off camera, so to speak, is the Rugby World Cup as one, they've done the best thing across the world in terms of winning 4 trophies, right? 2 back-to-backs. Never been done before. Most cups. But the point is, our society in South Africa still is an unequal society. It's still one that is marred with so many challenges. So rugby success hasn't really impacted, the overflow or what we've been sold back in the day in the 95 World Cup, where we're going to start building our nation, and success of the winning Springboks back then will have a dramatic effect on the rest of South Africa. Yes, it inspired us. It gives us this ideal of this rainbow nation, but we really need to climb this rainbow ups and downs together before we go for the pot of gold. The pot of gold is the win, but we're aiming for the win solely, and we're trying to rush towards the win. We really need to climb up this stuff up and down together, not
mm,
independently, not rankings, not you getting privileged while I'm struggling.
mm,
Together, let's find that commonality. And as we do this Rainbow Nation attempt, when the pot of gold comes, that is a secondary benefit because we've already won the victory of finding each other. And that's
mm,
the prize. The prize is as we're attempting for the cup is delivering our connections, our
mm,
sincerity of connections, which is what I phrase in Spirit of Cricket's language, the relational equity. The
mm,
equity will come from the relationships first, and then we'll get the reward of the cup, which is
mm.
just going to be a cherry on the top.
Yeah, yeah. Russell, I'm wondering, like I keep thinking in the back of my head, what you're thinking the people on the floor, on the ground, the moms, the dads, the coaches, the administrators, like if it was this idea, right, that we break down these barriers, whether they're known or unknown, whether they're seen or unseen, whether they're conscious or not, they definitely exist, right? They're there. And I think for the most part, it's unconscious until there's articles like these highlighting certain things. And then we all get a little bit uncomfortable for a couple of months. And then we just kind of hope it quietly goes away. And inevitably it does, only for it to resurface. But what do you think can be the differences that can be made? And I'll give maybe one example. You see nowadays young kids, right? They don't play with each other. Like my son, personally, his best friends he's had all his life were always Black African, if I had to be that specific, right? Or of color.
Mm.
Because my son is a loud individual, and so he resonates with that. I think there's a something that happens there, right? Maybe there's more to it, but he's always gotten fairly well with. If we stayed in a complex, he'd bring the black kids home, not the white kids, right? That wasn't just happened like that. Maybe not, but in my mind, And so I think there's these boundaries that existed. But certainly when we just came out of apartheid, it wasn't like that. It was almost frowned upon. So the boundaries are starting to break. But what do you think we could do better or more of? Or just in our homes, just at the nets, just in our offices, the people that work within cricket? What do you think they could do to aid, help, speed up this?
Yeah, so firstly, I think we need to realize that this mess can be turned into a message, a positive message, right?
Mm,
The mess that we find ourselves in, we have to get real about, number one, and that we can contribute to turning it into a very good message. Because as I said about the silver lining, there's always silver lining with a dark cloud. You got to look for it. You got to kind of let
mm,
this kind of darkness or mist, whatever, evade. Then you will find a gift hidden within it, right? Because challenges are the things that brings out the strength of each other, right? So as we go towards wanting to be real with each other, find each other on the basis of these uncomfortable conversations, as we lift these covers, if we look at it together from our different frames of references, make sure that the number one prize is to find connections with each other. The relationships amongst each other is first prize. And how we choose to go together.
mm,
The rugby phraseology, stronger together. We got to
mm,
almost trying to have a similar type of approach where we're saying, how do we find with all these disparities that we now disillusioned, but we're discovering, can we truly come to some form of clearing and connectedness, right?
mm,
How do we find our way together and then go up and down this rainbow towards the spot of gold? But we're discovering that connecting with each other is the first prize, and then the
mm,
pot of gold will be the second. The thing is, as we stretch for this winning, I just on a practical space, instead of constantly wanting our teams to win, we're wanting to win with the right spirit. We're wanting to win for the right reasons, right? So, which means we have to first find the win of being together, then on the proper holistic manner, and then the cup will mean so much more to us because we found our way to each other, and then we can lift this together. It also is going to take everyone's contribution. So the dismantling of putting our faith, almost like in the sense of voting now with the political side of things, The faith should be put not in political parties or particular leaders, but in ourselves as the ones who are casting our vote and acting out on that vote, playing our part to make the change. If we can do that, if we have an aspiration and a passion to move the game for our own kids, their futures, then we must play our part to add our voice to it. And our voice does matter from all the corners, right? Whether you're taking your kid to a mini cricket game and supporting it and saying, no, wait a minute, why are you having this language? Why are we speaking about it in such hero worship? These guys need to become role models more than hero worshippers. You know what I mean? Those sorts of languages. Let's just dismantle it all and let it work for us so that we have this synergy, that actually works for our society. And we can all do it in all different levels. So when we start approaching the game differently, we're using the game as a tool to enhance the connectedness that we can have as South Africans. And cricket is the commonality. So we've been sold this narrative of we're winners and we keep needing to be winners. It's not only in the stretch to win, it's winners on the inside. And let's call that out on inside of us now, whether your kid is 5 years old, about to be a professional, about to go and compete at the World Cup. We are all winners, whether you're the mother, the father, what doesn't matter. We are winners and we can call from our different spaces, call each other out, right? Come to the fore. We need your winning expression because we're going to make us stronger in that way. And let's go do it together.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I like that a lot. I think that's a great place to end this conversation for now.
Sure.
We put a pause on it, and I'm curious to see the response we get and the feedback we get. I'm curious to see where people think differently and disagree with us potentially, and where they do agree. So I want to invite everyone that's followed to please feel free. Like, comment below this video, share it with others, send us a private message if that's your style, if you don't want to put it on social media, because at the end of the day, it's about having the conversations, right? It's about moving the needle in terms of our understanding, moving the needle in terms of how we relate with each other, moving the needle in terms of how we think about what it means to be exceptional, excellent, at your best, and where that comes from and how that gets to be. So that hopefully in another 25 to 30 years from now, because all of this stuff does take time, we can be in a place that hasn't moved as slowly as the last 25 to 30 years has been. That we're in a place where picking a cricket team isn't the first article you're seeing is not about transformation targets not being met. That the first article you're seeing is, are we going to do this again? Who's going to stop us? Like that's the kind of things we want to be reading about our country, I think, more than or along those lines, right? I'm not a headline expert, but I think that's where I'd envisage we could go down the line versus the way that it has been going for the last 25 to 30 years. I think it is a time that we all collectively sit and think. And this goes to every single article writer, because they just keep reinforcing these ideas and concepts. Why? Because it gets maybe clicks or it gets likes, but it doesn't get us moving forward. It keeps bringing up, and again, I'm not discounting the past, I'm not saying we should not spend the time on that, but there's also, if we want to move forward at some point in time, my head says we've got to take the baggage and say, right, we've dealt with this baggage, right? We don't have to keep harboring it, because we've done the work that says it's not a thing anymore. We can actually look each other in the eye as equals on all levels, on all fronts. Excellence can come from anywhere, and we've got a system that allows that excellence to appear, and then when it's there, we can celebrate it equally. We can say, yes, this cricketer comes out of poverty, they come out of a poor place, but wow, look at them play in their unique way. That environment that they were exposed to has brought us our Paul Adams, our Malinga, our whatever it might be,
Yeah, I think just we are under no illusions that if we know how South Africans operate, like even in those articles, there tends to be quite an aggressive, straightforward, straight shooting type of response. And we're under no illusions that we could be offensive to some people, or just about having conversations, like we said. We welcome the kind of retort type of response, But also what we're suggesting is that this is just a platform to have kind of meaningful conversations, have constructive conversations with critical thinking, right?
Mm.
So it's really about sharing ideas, not about kind of victimizing one to another, calling each other out on, whatever labels we want to put on each other, because that tends to be what we tend to do, right? Our kind of system is, let me slap on a certain image of what I see you as, and then call you out on that, as blatantly as that. That's what South Africans tend to do at times. But maybe it's for deeper thinking right now, right? Because we need
Mm.
it. That's where under the cover. It's quite deep, hidden under the cover, and we need to surface it. And we're happy, and it's kind of like a disclaimer to say we're happy if there's abusiveness that may have come, not abusiveness, offensiveness, sorry, that may have come through this, because I think on the other side of truth, there might be freedom, because truth can offend before it frees.
Mm. Yeah, awesome. Russell, I'm looking forward to the next one, whatever topic we're gonna cover. Yeah, thanks for your time today, and I'll see you soon.
It was great. Thanks so much, Jerry. Thank you.
Cool.
Yes.